Anyway, I'll start talking, and
You have a
maybe we'll
fan
get
base
some
already.
graphics, maybe we won't. Earl James with Erler and Kawanski. We prepared under contract to the former redevelopment agency this document, which is the FS RAP. It was a result of a lot of work with the US EPA, Department of Toxic Substances Control, and representatives of CBS and Wareham. And I was paid by the redevelopment agency.
Thank you.
Which is yours?
Yeah, no, it's the,
This one?
yeah.
Could you just move your microphone up a little bit? You're taller than.
Thank you. Okay. I think you've seen this slide. In terms of remediation and what this site represents, I mean, this is a classic brownfield in the sense that it's a site that is stalled for redevelopment in the midst of an area that has been wonderfully redeveloped with office buildings and the Amtrak station and so forth. The history of it, that entire block where Emery Station number 2, Emery Station number 1, that was all part of the former Westinghouse facility. The remediation that is currently proposed will, and now I got to figure out how to change slides here. Let's go to slide 4. This shows the current condition of the site and the outlines of the parking lot. You can see the locations where investigations have been conducted by consultants for Westinghouse, CBS, and EKI on behalf of the city are shown on this map. The thin contour lines that sort of circle around the center of the site are the current elevation of the site, with the mound that was created by the cap that currently covers the contamination kind of represented by those curving lines through the middle. The heavier gray line around the outside is the slurry wall, which was it's a mud wall basically that was dug to contain the area where these polychlorinated biphenyls, PCBs, and the many other contaminants that are there are located. So currently the plan is to there was some additional soil sampling that was part of the plan that was conducted, that's been completed, and then to do soil excavation to an elevation of approximately 9.5 feet above sea level, and that's removing the cap and several feet of the soils that are contaminated below the cap. That is going to accomplish the removal of a significant portion of the contamination by taking that off, because what happened when they constructed the cap was they took some other contaminated soils that were around, they piled them inside the slurry wall on the top there, and then built the cap over the top. So this remediation is going to accomplish a very good thing of taking some of the highest levels of the PCB contamination off the site, out of your city, and have installed on top of it a more permanent cap in the form of the building and the foundations for the building, facilities that are more impermeable than the current cap is in many ways. There also will be some excavation of additional areas where there are very high concentrations of PCBs in the soil at these locations. And we're talking numbers that get up to like 24,000 milligrams per kilogram or parts per million of PCBs in soil. So these are areas of extremely high contamination, and they'll be removed also as part of the remediation. The other aspect of it that's been talked about is the in situ treatment of groundwater, where before the construction is conducted, there will be injection of an oxidant to knock down the concentrations of chlorinated volatile organic compounds And these are the kind of things that can leak out even with the cap that's on there now because they're volatile. And another advantage of the project and the proposed development is that the new building will have a vapor control system built into it to capture these and discharge them in the appropriate manner to the atmosphere. So these volatile organic compounds are both going to get treated on site by this injection that will take place before the development gets put on, and by treatment of the air from beneath the building. And these are the other aspects of the project. There'll be a barrier at the bottom of the excavation to protect the workers that are going to be working on it. The slurry wall will continue to function, and it's got now a decades-long history of containing the PCBs that are there. PCBs are not a chemical that move readily in the environment, except sort of physically. They don't migrate in groundwater, for instance. So the slurry wall was, at a certain level, kind of insurance against that. And then there are various institutional controls that have to do with the way various aspects of the site are handled. Does that answer your question?
Well, I think so, but can we go back to that one slide, the one before, where you had the different areas?
That one?
Yeah, and these work areas that you are in these hatch, so you can go down and remove all of the PCBs in those areas, or those
Yes, those are
no matter-
additional excavations. And there'll be other areas of deeper excavations that will be conducted for elevator shafts and pile caps and grade beams and things that are part of the construction of the building. So there's the one level, and then below that, there's hot spots that are getting taken out for PCBs, and other areas where elevator shafts and various things are going to be.
So there'll still be, so all the hot spots, as you said, will be removed, or what will be
There are
remain?
still some elevated concentrations of PCBs that will remain on the site, and there will still be various of the other contaminants that are related to it. They'll be inside the slurry wall and capped by the structure that's put at the bottom of the excavation and then the foundations of the building.
So these PCBs aren't really leaching any deeper, or?
No. No. They found the full depth of them has been explored and evaluated.
Okay.
And they kind of sank. They were released in various ways up at the surface. They sank down to a certain level, and the slurry wall is built below that level.
Okay.
And they're held in place there.
So there's no concern about the groundwater, or?
No.
No. And how deep would we have to go to remove it all?
It's another 15 feet or so, 15, 20 feet. One of the alternatives that we looked at was that there was a grade of below grade parking there, or a section of below grade parking, which would take out a lot of that if that were to be constructed. But it's a difficult project to do, to take out those deeper levels. Extremely expensive, and it's been secure the way that it's been constructed for a couple of decades, the way it sits now. So I think there's a combination in the current plan of taking out some of those highest concentrations that are closest to the surface, taking care in a way of breaking down the volatile organic compounds that are there with the injections, and then maintaining the containment that's there that's been proven to be effective for a long time.
Okay.
I have a question for you, Earl. I'm a little confused here. When you talk about you're removing the top 10 feet,
Not quite.
9.5?
Going to an elevation of 9.5, and the top elevation of the mound is about 16, 17 feet. So it's about 7, 8 feet at sort of the peak of the mound, down to an elevation of 9.5, plus some deeper spots below that.
Well, the sea level there is about, what, 22 feet down? So you're
below the
really
ground
not
surface.
talking about going down, leaving toxics in there for, a large amount of space, because before you get too far, you're going to hit sea level.
Yeah, there's another 10 or 15 feet of
I don't think it's
contaminated soil below
15.
what's going to be dug out. And I have not looked at
That
the cross
elevation
sections
is
in a bit.
22 feet right there.
Okay.
So the question that I have, when you compare those things, is there any estimate at all as to what amount of toxics would be left, or the nature of the toxics? Has any testing been done on that?
Yes, it's been
Could you elucidate on that?
Well, let me go back to another slide here and show you. Look again at the slide where we have all of the sampling locations. So each one of these little dots with a number next to it is a place where some sort of boring or probe has been put into the ground, soil or groundwater or both, or vapors have been collected at those locations. And sort of the three-dimensional distributions of those chemicals is as well known as it is at any site that we work with. You don't know every ounce of soil that's there, but this is the way it's done, and that's a very extensive level of investigation that's been conducted to know what's down there.
So then would you be able to tell us, is the most concentration of the toxics is in the top 10 feet of the soil?
Some of the very highest concentrations are in that top portion that's going to get taken off the site.
Have you found
yes.
in any of these hot spots high concentrations in the lower 20?
There are some higher concentrations. There's a couple of what I think of as kind of pipes.
Right.
Where one story that I heard is, and you can see on air photos, there were tank cars that went out there and they would empty transformers sort of
Right.
down. So there are a couple of pipes where the high concentrations go down. They're small areas. The tops of those are going to get taken off in the excavations, and at some of those squares where the deeper excavations are.
Okay, thank you, Earl.
Other question, Jennifer? Can I just follow up on a few of what you've mentioned? So it looks like from your legend here, the sampling was done in 2002 and 2004, and there's been groundwater monitoring. But what kind of sampling do you have over the last 10 years of, I mean, you said the slurry wall is containing it. I'm curious how you know that.
There's groundwater monitoring that goes on that is conducted by CBS. There's also a lot of groundwater monitoring on the other side of the railroad tracks that goes on. So, I mean, Emeryville, with its industrial history, has a lot of monitoring wells around. Mm-hmm. So chemicals that are moving around show up in one network or another. Mm-hmm. And it's well documented that the slurry wall has been effective at containing what's there for the decades that it has been installed. I haven't looked, but I know there's ongoing quarterly, annual groundwater monitoring going on at the site.
And the other things you said are not in the groundwater. You said PCBs are not in the groundwater.
Correct. So they're just sitting there in soil.
So you know that they haven't moved.
Right.
And how do you know that from?
Well, and I wouldn't know. I mean, I can't.
I wouldn't know, but I'm asking how you know.
But they're not,
Volatile.
people have studied very extensively the sort of chemical nature of PCBs and how they react in the environment. Mm-hmm. And there are many sites similar to this. Westinghouse has released quite a large volume of PCBs into the environment and spent a lot of money investigating how they behave so that they can understand, along with EPA, and DTSC, how to deal with them when they're found. So there's a lot of information that would say that these are kind of where they get released is where they stay.
Okay. Did you at one point have a plan to clean this site further than the current plan?
We evaluated a couple of different, what they're called, alternatives in this document. Mm-hmm. They're all written up in there and kind of compared in terms of effectiveness and cost and the ability to implement them. So we did evaluate other approaches to it. To some degree, working with various ideas of how the site might get redeveloped.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of the area around it that you commented on that's already been redeveloped, how does this cleanup plan, because I wasn't on the council at that time when those were approved, how does this cleanup plan compare to the sites nearby, or alternatively, how is it different?
Well, it's really the same approach as all of the major sites in Emeryville have had. It's risk-based, so there are extensive calculations of what the human health risks are, both to people who are in the future might use and be around the site, to the workers who are going to be doing the kind of construction of the site. All of the sites around here have some remnant of the contamination. And the cleanups are done in ways that allow the redevelopment to occur and limit the ongoing damage to the environment. And this is right in line with all of those, and it's following all the same guidance, and they all have what we call fat books that document all the investigation and all the analysis, and this site is right in line with all those.
So this one's not worse than the other ones around it were?
No.
And the reason it's been capped and used as a surface parking lot instead of being developed is not related to what's in the soil?
No, it's really a financial thing. It's a brownfield where it could get cleaned up, and it can get cleaned up with the appropriate sort of business structure around it, and that's why all the other ones have gotten cleaned up as well through one mechanism or another.
And this kind of follows on Councilmember Davis's question, but what's left after the excavation? And I understand now it's not excavating 9.5 feet down. You're excavating to 9.5 feet above sea level.
Correct.
That's the 9.5. So
Correct.
It was a little different than what we heard earlier. But what's left underneath?
What's left are the same chemicals that Helen had in her list of the PCBs, chlorobenzene, the chlorinated volatile organic compounds. They will be there. The chlorinated volatile organic compounds, and I believe some of the chlorobenzenes, will be broken down to one degree or another by the injection of the oxidants. And some of the very highest concentrations of the PCBs will be removed. Some of them in limited areas below the footprint of the building will remain behind the slurry wall.
And under the foundation?
And under the foundation.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Before you did your study, I heard from another, and there were only 2 of us on the council who are still here tonight, but I heard something that disturbed me a dozen years ago, which is that the nature of the slurry wall was measured in terms of viscosity, and to me that implies permeability. And while that was acceptable, the slurry wall was built only with the PCBs in mind, which, as you've indicated, are pretty static contaminants. You've also acknowledged that there are things that can get through the slurry wall, such as VOCs and some of the other things that are in there. So the fact that the slurry wall would remain in a technology that was maybe fine for the time that it was done certainly would not be used today. And this is a once in a multi-generational opportunity to do the job right in terms of the remediation that has to happen there. So the fact that the slurry wall, which is measured in terms of viscosity, is still remaining with outmoded technology, while that might be fine for the most stable contaminant, it isn't okay for the VOCs. So my question to you is what % of contaminants will remain that are not being excavated? You said most will be removed, but is that 80%? Is it 60%? Is it 51%? What's going to remain because it's below the level of the dig?
I have not calculated what the remaining percentages might be. We have made various calculations of what the sort of exposure point concentrations, there are various terms and ways that that these chemicals concentrations are calculated to use in the risk-based assessments. And those calculations say that doing the remediation that's proposed, building the cap of the building that's proposed, will result in a safe site. I will, it is true that the slurry wall was installed to contain the PCBs. It's not correct that a slurry wall is outmoded technology. Slurry walls are well-proven, long-term used technologies, mainly to help control water movement. And really what we're worried about with those other contaminants is water. And the slurry wall changes the way the water moves out there so that the water moves around it. Water really doesn't move through that slurry wall. So the slurry wall was and is an effective technology. And the remediation plan has added in sort of our latest thing that we do, which is injection of the oxidants to break down the volatile organic compounds. So that is the kind of modern addition that this current approach to the remediation adds. And frankly, you know, taking the PCBs, piling them in trucks, putting a bunch of you know, carbon into the atmosphere, trucking them down to Kettleman Hills, or up to, right now you couldn't even take them to Kettleman Hills because that landfill isn't open, taking them up to Oregon or off to Nevada or wherever. I'm not sure that that, you know, what's left is in a place that will cause no harm based on what we know. And the trade-off between taking the hot stuff off the top and leaving some behind is not a bad balance in what's proposed here. You know, it's approved by EPA, it's approved by DTSC. A lot of time and energy's gone into the study of it, and it's what we do today.
How would the site correlate to Bay Street, the Site B? Were you involved in that site?
Yes.
So is it comparable as far as what happened at Bay Street versus what you're proposing here? Are your recommendations here?
Yes, I mean, we did basically the same thing at Bay Street, excavated to the extent necessary to allow the redevelopment to occur in a cost-effective way. And we are currently conducting and continuing to conduct injection of chemicals to break down the chlorinated volatile organic compounds that are there. There are remaining concentrations of arsenic and other chemicals of concern that are above background, clearly an impact from human activities, but at a level that the risk-based assessment that we conducted says is safe for the future uses. There will be, as part of that redevelopment, vapor controls installed on the buildings. So it's very equivalent to what was done at Site B.
Okay, thank you.
Jack, I don't have any more questions for Earl.